calmer. But it was pretty cool to have the publisher walking in blue jeans and casuals at the time. But once she had perfected the art form, she was pretty indelible in all of it.
It was a lot of fun. So anyway, so we get to do a tour of DC, and this is a moment for me. Now, I had a chance to work in television. I've been working in television for, at that point, about 15 years or so, and I had a chance to work with the cast of MASH, the original cast of Dukes of Hazzard, different soap operas, Steve Martin, a bunch of people. So I was more excited about going to the DC Comics offices and meeting the people there than anything that I had done in television. And I never forgot the big moment when she gets to introduce me to Mike Carlin. And I'm so excited to introduce me to Mike, and Mike says, I heard you're developing Metalman. And I sit there, absolutely, I'm developing Metalman. And don't worry about it, we're going to make it the ones with the robots. Not that version you just did with the reinvented the characters as, you know, people's souls in them. And all he goes, I wrote that. And I was so blind, I said, that's right, we're going to fix it.
Diplomatic Dan DiDio, even in his early days.
That was my first moment, and to me, it was always someplace that I've always been excited about being part of. And to get a chance to meet with Jeanette and with Paul was exciting for me. I get so many fanboy moments when I first started there. It's, you know, from that moment there to walking into Bob Schreck's office when he was working with Frank Miller as they were working on the Dark Knight sequel, and Frank is raging about something, and I'm trying to find out what they're talking about, but all I could do was stare at the art. Then he pulled out these beautiful pages of artboard of the Batman material. But I never forgot my very first panel, my very first convention, which I was sitting on the very first panel, and I'm sitting next to Jim, and Jim would sit there the whole time just doodling, not looking up, not looking up. The question comes up, he'd answer it perfectly, not miss a beat, not miss a question, go back down, back to doodling, back to doodling. And all I did was watch him. I didn't have anything to say, but all I remember is that when he finished, he ripped off the thing and he handed it off to me and just walked off the panel. And I just wanted to let you know, I framed it. Because I was that excited by it. And for all you guys in the room, the one thing that was the coolest perk, I was able to get a copy of Canceled Comic Cavalcades 1 and 2. And so if anybody knows what I'm talking about, that was a huge deal for me. And it was good that they didn't print them. Anyway.
Mr. John, sir, the young pup on it, you're our last arrival.
Well, I'll give you the perspective about how much I love DC Comics. Is when I was in high school, I used to ask my mom for all my lunch money Monday to learn responsibility. And I would go to the grocery store on the way to the school and buy one of those 99-cent boxes of Little Debbie snack rolls and eat one a day for lunch. And I'd save the $9 and I'd buy 15 comics. Wow.
So we've now learned an untold story, but we haven't really learned anything about turning points. And we've all been privileged to be part of some of these turning points. I think probably the highlight of my professional career, certainly on the business side of the company, was to be a part with Jeanette, Joe Orlando, and Dick Giordano in crafting the first royalty plans that really fueled DC's ability to capitalize on what Jim was talking about, bringing for the first time creative people's opportunities in line with the company's opportunities. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it was really just a couple of years after that first wave of amazing comics started to come into the business. Because really, comics had for a long time operated on a version of the Russian saying, they pretend to pay us and we pretend to work. And for the first time, there was a reason to do the best you could and to strive for it, because you would win that way along with the company. So that to me was, I think, the most important turning point in the career that I got to play with. Turning points that you were a part of and something about it that mattered to you in the victory. Dennis, we'll go down in order this time.
As I said earlier, the sea change in attitude that happened about the time that you and Jeanette took the helm. The thing that constantly amazes me is that when I started in comics, God help me, 45 years ago, it really was disruptive. I mean, it was coming off of the 50s and the Wortham stuff and the Kefauver stuff. We were, comic book guys were corrupting the youth of the nation and causing an epidemic of stabbings and teen pregnancies and so on, which made it a very comfortable place to work. It wasn't supposed to be good. And I was sure I could manage not good. I was not sure I could do anything else. But now, Lord help us, I teach at a major university, and so do a bunch of people in this room. We have as much respect as any popular art form. That has changed 180 degrees. My son, who makes movies, says that, oh, when I first went out to Hollywood to sell some television, the agent said, keep the comic book connection quiet. Talk about your science fiction stories. Now, the comic book connection opens producers' doors. Well, while I wasn't looking, we became respectable. And I'm not sure how well I'm handling it. That, I think, is the most significant change that I can think of, and it has a ripple effect.
But I'm going to accuse you of something, Denny, because we talked about this really in one of the previous panels. God, what are the panels? That before it began to be respectable, and before there was any economic incentive for it, a lot of what you were doing as a writer on Batman and Green Lantern, Green Arrow, was the first material at DC to take the stuff seriously on its own terms, and to begin to add that kind of darkness and noir feeling that so much of comics have descended from in that time. You may not have had either the incentive or even the endorsement of the company in some ways to do it, but it came from what you wanted to do, and that certainly was an important turning point that you participated in or led in without necessarily deciding to change the world, but just because it was something you had to give in place.
And to make the job interesting for me.
Okay.
That had a lot to do with it. If you're going to do this thing, try and do it in a way that ends up with something you'd like to read. And again, you have to thank editors. Julie never put his ego, I mean, at that point he was one of the veterans of the business, more than 20 years. But he didn't know the right way to do it. I mean, he had no preset ideas, which means you could come in and you could pitch it. You could pitch making Green Arrow a social activist. And he didn't know any reason not to do that. He was wide open to any suggestion and never for one microsecond intruded his ego between the creator and what something is eventually reading.
Ms. Khan, you've been accused of leading a turning point here. You got another one to offer us?
Well, I guess my turning point is very much a juncture of what you were talking about, Paul, about royalties, and what you were talking about, Jim, in terms of the aesthetics. Because it wasn't even just royalties. We tried to give rights, which were totally deserved rights, where there were none, and that included return of artwork, share of all ancillary income, you know, if there was a movie made or a TV show or licensed products, and royalties, of course, a critical part of that, sometimes the copyright in your own name as the creator. And when we led that change, which then became adopted throughout the industry, but we began to gain the confidence of creators, of artists and writers. And we said, we are now a place where you can do your best work, and we really want you to do it here, and we respect that, we respect your contribution, and we'll see that you participate in your contribution. But that wasn't enough. We needed the work, and I was looking over at Marvel and Frank Miller's work, and I thought maybe we should start there. And so I asked Frank to lunch and said, what would you like to do? Just tell me what you'd like to do most of all in comics, what your dream is, and I will try to make it happen.